In the annals of computing history, few stories are as heartbreaking as that of BeOS, the operating system that dared to reimagine what personal computing could be. Created by Be Incorporated between 1991 and 2001, BeOS wasn't just another operating system trying to compete with Windows or Mac OS. It was a revolutionary piece of software engineering that solved problems the industry didn't even know it had, delivered performance that seemed like magic, and offered capabilities that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. Yet despite its technical brilliance, BeOS became one of technology's greatest what-ifs, a cautionary tale of how superior engineering can be crushed by corporate politics, anti-competitive practices, and simple bad timing. The story begins with Jean-Louis Gassée, a charismatic French executive who had served as Apple's head of product development during the late 1980s. Gassée was the man behind Apple's premium pricing strategy and the driving force behind products like the Apple Cheese. But by 1990, he had grown frustrated with Apple's direction and left to pursue his own vision of computing's future. Gassée saw that personal computers were becoming multimedia machines, but the operating systems of the day were struggling to keep up. BeOS was a relic from the text-based era. Windows was still an unstable layer on top of DOS, and even the Mac OS, despite its graphical interface, was built on foundations that dated back to 1984. What the world needed, Gassée believed, was an operating system designed from the ground up for the multimedia age. He founded Be Incorporated in 1990, raising $10 million in initial funding, and set out to build not just a new operating system, but an entirely new computing platform. BeOS was engineered with an obsessive focus on real-time multimedia performance and multi-threading capabilities that were light years ahead of its competition. While Windows 95 could barely handle playing a CD while running other applications, BeOS could simultaneously play multiple video streams, process audio in real time, and run dozens of applications without breaking a sweat. The secret was its pervasive multi-threading architecture, where everything from the file system to the user interface was designed to take advantage of multiple processors and parallel processing. The operating system featured a 64-bit journaling file system called BFS that could handle massive files and recover instantly from crashes, while competitors were still struggling with 16-bit file allocation tables. BeOS could boot in under 15 seconds on hardware where Windows took minutes, and it could play back video files that would bring other systems to their knees. The demo that became legendary showed BeOS simultaneously playing 8 QuickTime movies while running other applications, something that was simply impossible on Windows or Mac OS of the era. Even more impressive, users could drag the video windows around the screen in real time without dropping frames, a feat that seemed like pure magic in 1995. Initially, BeOS ran on Be's own hardware platform called the BeBox, a distinctive computer with a translucent case and 2 front-mounted LED meters that showed real-time CPU usage for its dual processors. The BeBox was built around PowerPC processors and included features that were revolutionary for personal computers, such as multiple serial ports for MIDI equipment, built-in Ethernet networking, and a hardware design optimized for multimedia applications. Be sold the BeBox directly to customers starting in 1995 for $1,999, positioning it as a premium multimedia workstation. The machine attracted a passionate following among digital media professionals, musicians using MIDI equipment, and early digital video enthusiasts who were amazed by its capabilities. Music software companies like Steinberg and Mark of the Unicorn created powerful applications for the platform, taking advantage of BeOS's real-time audio capabilities that allowed for latency-free music recording and playback. However, selling both hardware and software put Be in direct competition with much larger companies, and the BeBox struggled to gain significant market share against established players like Apple and the emerging Wintel standard. Recognizing that hardware was a losing battle for a small company, Gassée made the strategic decision in 1996 to abandon the BeBox and port BeOS to standard PC hardware and power Macintosh computers. This transition marked BeOS Release 3, which could run on PowerPC-based Macs, and offered Mac users a glimpse of what their computers could really do when freed from the limitations of Mac OS. The performance difference was stunning. Mac users could install BeOS alongside their existing system and watch their computers transform into multimedia powerhouses. Video editing that required expensive dedicated hardware on other platforms could be done in software on BeOS with standard consumer hardware. The operating system's advanced memory protection meant that crashed applications wouldn't bring down the entire system, a major improvement over the cooperative multitasking of classic macOS. Be also released BeOS Personal Edition as a free download, allowing anyone to try the operating system without purchasing new hardware. This strategy began to build a community of devoted BeOS users who evangelized the platform's capabilities and created a thriving ecosystem of software applications. The year 1997 presented BeOS with its greatest opportunity when Apple, struggling with an aging operating system and declining market share, began searching for a next-generation OS to replace macOS. Apple needed a modern foundation that could support macOS X, and BeOS seemed like a perfect fit. Gassée and his team believed they had the inside track, given his history with Apple and BeOS's clear technical advantages over other contenders. Apple executives were genuinely impressed by BeOS demonstrations, and negotiations proceeded through multiple rounds. However, when it came time to discuss price, Gassée demanded $400 million for Be Inc., a figure that Apple considered excessive. Some reports suggest that Apple was willing to pay around $125 million, but Gassée refused to budge from his asking price. In one of technology's great sliding doors moments, Apple walked away from BeOS and instead acquired Next Computer for $429 million, bringing Steve Jobs back to Apple and providing the foundation for Mac OS X. This decision sealed BeOS's fate, as losing the Apple deal eliminated its best chance for mainstream adoption and the financial resources needed to compete with Microsoft. Undeterred by the Apple rejection, Be pivoted toward the PC market with BeOS Release 4 in 1998, which ran natively on Intel 886 hardware and offered PC users their first taste of a truly modern operating system. BeOS on PC hardware was revelatory, delivering performance that made Windows 98 look primitive by comparison. The operating system could install in under 30 minutes, boot faster than any competitor, and run multiple demanding applications simultaneously without the crashes and slowdowns that plagued Windows. Be partnered with several computer manufacturers to offer BeOS as a pre-installed option, and companies like Hitachi and eMachines began shipping systems with BeOS alongside Windows. The dual boot capability allowed users to keep Windows for compatibility while experiencing the future of computing with BeOS. Technology journalists and industry experts consistently praised BeOS for its technical excellence, with many declaring it the best operating system most people had never heard of. However, despite critical acclaim and a growing user base, Be struggled to convince mainstream software developers to create applications for the platform, creating a classic chicken and egg problem where users wanted software and developers wanted users. The final act in BeOS's tragedy played out against the backdrop of Microsoft's anti-competitive practices that would later result in major antitrust litigation. As Be attempted to gain market share through PC manufacturer partnerships, Microsoft began using its Windows monopoly to squeeze BeOS out of the market. Computer manufacturers who wanted to include BeOS on their systems faced threats from Microsoft about Windows licensing terms and pricing. Microsoft's licensing agreements required PC makers to pay for Windows on every computer they sold, regardless of whether Windows was actually installed, making it economically difficult to offer alternative operating systems. When Gateway Computer planned to offer BeOS pre-installed on some of its systems, Microsoft allegedly threatened to revoke Gateway's Windows licensing, effectively ending the partnership. Similar pressure was applied to other manufacturers, systematically eliminating BeOS's path to market. In 2002, Be Inc. filed a lawsuit against Microsoft, alleging anti-competitive practices that destroyed BeOS's chances for success. The lawsuit detailed how Microsoft used its monopoly power to prevent competition and maintain its stranglehold on the desktop operating system market. After years of litigation, Microsoft settled the case in 2005 for $23.25 million, a tiny fraction of Microsoft's revenues, but vindication for Be's claims about anti-competitive behavior. By 2000, BeOS had evolved into Release 5, also known as BeOS Professional Edition, which represented the pinnacle of the platform's development and showcased features that wouldn't appear in mainstream operating systems for years to come. The final version included a revolutionary new file system with metadata support that allowed users to organize and search files in ways that anticipated modern Spotlight search and tagging systems. BeOS featured built-in internet functionality with a native web browser, email client, and networking tools that were seamlessly integrated into the operating system experience. The platform supported symmetric multiprocessing across multiple CPUs, making it one of the first consumer operating systems designed for the multi-core future. Advanced users could run BeOS alongside Windows in a virtual partition, or install it on dedicated hardware to experience computing without compromise. Despite these innovations, Be Inc. was running out of money and options, having spent over $100 million in investor funding without achieving sustainable market share. The company's burn rate was unsustainable, and the window for challenging Microsoft's dominance was rapidly closing as Windows 2000 and Windows XP began to address some of the stability and performance issues that had made BeOS attractive by comparison. The end came swiftly in 2001 when Be Inc., facing bankruptcy and unable to secure additional funding, sold its intellectual property to Palm Computing for just $11 million, a fraction of the money invested in the platform's development. Palm intended to use BeOS technology as the foundation for future handheld devices and internet appliances, but these plans never materialized in any meaningful way. The acquisition effectively ended BeOS as a desktop operating system, scattering its talented engineering team across the industry and closing the book on one of the most innovative software projects of the 1990s. Many BeOS engineers went on to influential roles at companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft, taking their expertise in multi-threading, real-time systems, and user interface design to projects that would shape computing's future. The BeOS user community refused to let the platform die completely, with projects like Haiku attempting to recreate the BeOS experience as open-source software, but these efforts never achieved the polish or momentum of the original. The legacy of BeOS extends far beyond its brief commercial lifespan, as many of its innovations eventually found their way into mainstream operating systems through the engineers who worked on the project and the ideas they championed. Mac OS X incorporated advanced multi-threading and multimedia capabilities that echoed BeOS design principles, while Windows gradually evolved to include better memory protection, faster boot times, and improved multimedia handling. Modern smartphone operating systems like iOS and Android implement the kind of responsive, multimedia-focused design that BeOS pioneered on the desktop. The rise of digital video editing, music production software, and real-time multimedia applications validated Gassée's original vision of computing's multimedia future, even though BeOS didn't survive to participate in that transformation. Perhaps most significantly, BeOS demonstrated that small teams of brilliant engineers could create software that outperformed the products of much larger corporations, inspiring a generation of entrepreneurs to challenge established players with superior technology. The story of BeOS remains a touchstone for discussions about innovation versus market power, technical excellence versus business execution, and the role of anti-competitive practices in shaping technology markets. It stands as both an inspiration for what's possible when engineers are freed to reimagine fundamental computing concepts, and a warning about the harsh realities that face even the most innovative technologies in a world where market dominance often trumps technical superiority.